Chicago, this is Bruce DuMont with our Beyond the Beltway analysis of national politics, featuring occasional injections of rumor and innuendo, all offered by our panel of political insiders, pundits, power brokers, public servants, professors, and most importantly, plain-speaking Americans from coast to coast. Tonight, featuring commentary from Charles Lipson from the University of Chicago, Mike Miller from DePaul University, and Jennifer Nevins, a pro-Trumper from the get-go. Our program tonight coming to you from the Museum of Broadcast Communications, the Paul and Angel Harvey Radio Studio. Nice to have you with us. Phone lines open, 1-800-723-8289. That's 1-800-723-8289. If you'd like to email me a comment, it's beyondthebeltway2019 at gmail.com. If you want to tweet me a comment, it's at DuMo, at D-U-M-O. And of course, you can join us live at beyondthebeltway.com and on Facebook Live and also on YouTube. We got a lot of listeners every Sunday night or even during the week because once it goes up on YouTube, it's there like forever. It's like going on our website. So it's nice to have you with us, the variety of ways you can see and hear this program each and every Sunday night. And if you miss us also, we're in Chicago, we're on WYND radio on Sunday nights that you can hear the replay, and also Spotify. So there's really no excuse not to hear and see what we do here every Sunday night. And it is nice to have you with us. I should mention something right at the top of the program. You may have heard or you may have read on my Facebook page the passing of a dear member of the Beyond the Beltway family. And we're going to talk more about him a little bit later on. But Michael Bauer, who's been a guest here for several years, a couple of months ago, he talked about his battle against cancer. Again, we'll hear some of the words of wisdom from Michael Bauer a little bit later on in this hour of our program. But again, he would be remiss if he didn't want to jump into the big stories of the week. And so I'm going to begin with Mike Miller, a good friend of Mike Bauer's. And my question to you, Mike, is how big was the story about Comey and the Inspector General? And are you surprised that the national media has not played it up much?
I'm not surprised that the national media hasn't played it up because he looks bad. Being a Republican, he was a Republican. I always had a very good opinion of him from the past. And he just comes off as such a fool. And his reaction to it and his saying that I've been exonerated and I'm owed an apology. Unbelievable that he would say such a thing.
Jennifer Nevins is our original Trumpster, as I said in the opening. What's your reaction?
I think you're looking at a man without shame. We have quite a few people running around these days that don't seem to have one scintilla of self-awareness or embarrassment or shame about what they do. And I think the biggest takeaway for me, no, the media is not going to give the proper attention to this. So we have to skip ahead and say, is this a damning...
Press didn't even mention it.
No, it's a horribly damning report. But that as it may, it's almost as if that doesn't matter because the media isn't going to say it's all about the media. If they're not going to trumpet that it was a damning report, it's left to those of us with intellectual honesty to say that it was a damning report. And it was indicting Comey on the fact that he thought that those personal memos of his were personal, that all of that material, his work product, belonged to him. And it didn't. It was FBI material, and he did pass that along, and that's really the nuts and bolts of it to me. And he thinks he's owed an apology,
but
and
Bill
it's ridiculous.
Barr, the Attorney General, appointed by your friend Donald Trump, he said that there's nothing that he's going to be prosecuted for. So again, you read the report, you can be as riled up as you want, but the piece of flesh that a lot of Trumpsters wanted, Bill Barr is not going to give it to them.
Well, we've got a report in 2 weeks coming out about the origins of the Russia probe, and I'm not going to be overly optimistic and say that that's what's going to hang Comey, but my jury is out until that report's dropped.
Okay, Charles Lipson from the University of Chicago, your reaction to the news of last week?
The first thing I thought about the report is that it was extremely damning on the way that Comey ran the FBI. Basically, it was a seat-of-the-pants, very personalistic operation that was all run around the issue of what Comey thought was the right thing to do, as opposed to well-established policies that were vetted by other people. In fact, when the FBI raided his house for the documents that he had wrongly taken, he did not tell them that he had still other documents there. Those came out later. I think what we're going to find is that the counterintelligence parts of the FBI operating in conjunction with the CIA and others in the Obama National Security Team began, and in conjunction with Hillary Clinton's campaign and the State Department, all worked together to sink Donald Trump's election, and then after his election to damn his presidency. And as this is thoroughly investigated, I think it will be shocking. It will be hard for NBC to run without the story.
It will be, however, a question as to whether or not anything that came out last week or anything that's coming out in the next IG report or anything that's coming out from the U.S. Attorney in Connecticut, who was appointed by the Attorney General to look into this case, which gets into the way in which the FBI was used to get the FISA report, or FISA plan passed or approved by the judge. The question is this going to change any vote, or is this just a gotcha moment for those that are supporting the president? But is it going to turn into votes, Mike?
I'm only hoping that I'll almost say that the election is secondary. What to me is necessary here is some kind of justice. And I can tell you, I like small government. I don't trust government. But I have become more and more disturbed by everything I see, that there are two justice systems. There's one for all of us, and there's one for them. And them are people like Comey and Hillary Clinton, and I'm sure some Republicans along the way as well, that we just aren't given a fair shake. I heard a comment that this law that he violated by putting these personal things and giving them out, it wasn't a real bad law that he broke. I could imagine them saying that to me if I do something in my car or whatever. It wasn't a bad job, a bad law, so I think I'll let you go. I know darn well that would never occur. So
it didn't happen to Deutsch when he was the CIA director, and he had his computer at home and had typed a few things. He wasn't prosecuted, but he lost his security clearance. I mean, they really handled him.
Is the bigger story here, when we look at the impact of this story and the use of the story by each side to try to cast aspersions on the opposite side, is the bigger story here that there is no major news operation that the American people can go to say, I'm going to get a straight story from CBS, ABC, NBC, CNN, or Fox News? Is that the loss here? In other words, if the founding fathers wanted us to believe that an informed citizenry is what was really needed, have we passed the point where we can have an informed citizenry based on facts? That's the question. I want to discuss that with our guest this evening. I want to discuss it with you as well. 1-800-723-8029 from coast to coast and border to border. This is Beyond the Beltway.
Hi, I'm Ryan Sandberg, and I want to tell you about Miracle, the musical, inspired by the 2016 champion Chicago Cubs. It's one of the best productions I have ever seen. Now playing at the Royal George Theater. Do not miss it.
A line is a powerful thing. It connects the global economy to your living room. Cleaner air to stronger markets. Factory floors to less crowded roads. Today's progress to tomorrow's promise. Norfolk Southern. One line, infinite possibilities.
Oh, hello. You know, these days, I'm often quoted as saying, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. People forget that I was the first technology president, using the telegraph, T-mails as I like to call them, to communicate with my generals. Well, today we are fighting a cybersecurity war, and our best defense is for folks to follow some of these tips when they're online. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Hover your cursor over links to determine the true web address. Look for misspellings and poor grammar, which are warning signs of fraud. Be suspicious of emails requesting urgent action, and never give away sensitive personal information. With malware for none, with cyber protection for all. This is your humble servant, Abraham Lincoln.
From Boston, Massachusetts to Springfield, Illinois, you're listening to Beyond the Beltway. Nice to have you with us this evening. Jennifer Neverts, let me ask you the question. You are probably the strongest card-carrying, flag-waving, banner-supporting Trumpster we've had on the program for the last couple of years, maybe with the exception of our good friend Doug Eibendahl. But my question to you is there anything that the mainstream media could tell you about Donald Trump that was 100% accurate that you would accept?
If it was 100% accurate, I'd accept it. I don't know how. You know, it's a misnomer to think that a lot of Trump supporters think that, Trump came down with the 10 Commandments from, Mount Sinai. We know it didn't happen, most of us. And so I'm not a sycophant, and there have been times when Trump has done things that, frankly, I've spoken about on this program that I didn't approve of. So, yeah, I think that absolutely. Would I question the source? Yeah, you have to nowadays, because the mainstream media, by and large, are not honest brokers.
When the president states that he wanted to drop a nuclear bomb on a hurricane, and then also adds, when it comes to the Category 5 hurricanes that he has experienced before, and saying yesterday that he had never knew what a hurricane, Stage 5 hurricane was, in essence. When you hear those stories, do you believe those stories?
It is a frustration because the media knows damn well how Donald Trump talks. He uses hyperbole. He's very loose with talk. Just like when he says Fox News is no longer working for us, he doesn't mean they actually were supposed to work for him. They mean in the same way I say, this job isn't working for me, or this isn't working for me. It's an expression. Does anybody reasonable think that Donald Trump really wanted to drop a nuke on a hurricane? Well, if you believe that, there's not really much I can say to you. I know that that's not what he meant, but it's so amusing that the media is so intent on being so literal with Trump.
You don't think he said it?
I think he said it in the same way he says a lot of things. I want to drop a nuke on that hurricane. I mean, come on. Do you really think that he thinks that a nuke is going to work?
Yeah,
Mike, your response to this.
Yeah, I had heard that actually someone talked about this years ago, some meteorologist, in terms of the amount of energy in a nuke versus the amount of energy inside of a Category 5 hurricane and so forth. And it turns out a hurricane generates what a nuke does in a matter of seconds. The hurricane is so powerful. But these things, and he probably heard it somewhere, and it just came out of his mouth. And you're right, Jennifer, that's exactly the kind of guy that he is. But I don't remember the press focusing, though Republicans did. The member of Congress who was afraid that if we put too much stuff on the island of Guam, it's going to capsize.
Johnson.
Yeah.
Johnson was his name.
Yeah.
I don't remember all of a sudden look at this fool making these foolish statements. And he really did think that.
When the news media reports these stories, are they legitimate stories to report if indeed the president ask that question? And secondly, there are people that are supporters of Donald Trump. They would say, well, why isn't that a legitimate question? It may be silly, but you know what? I've had the same question. But the president had the guts to ask a question, even though it might have been a stupid question. And a lot of teachers say there's no such thing as a stupid question. Would you say that, Professor?
There are stupid questions. Anybody?
Anybody who is talking.
Hey, you run a talk show. You ought to know.
Well, I know, but that's my point, though. Is if you ask a stupid question, there's a lot of people that may want the answer
Well,
to
let me
that
give you
stupid
my
question.
short answer. There are two sides on this that could be explored. One is about Trump. The other is about the media. And what you were really focusing on, I think rightly, was, do we trust the media? And let me say a couple of things about that. Ever since Dan Rather tried to sink George W. Bush with a fraudulent item, and he was uncovered by the earliest version of the web, people have really seen how mainstream media has become more and more partisan. And that's not just misreporting stories like Dan Rather did. It's what you said about NBC's Meet the Press, where they omit stories. I'd say the second thing to say here is that there are leaks that come out of all White Houses. And what you see at the Washington with the Washington Press Corps is that if the leak is negative to Trump, they will run with it. Let me just mention that the woman who resigned this week, who was a sort of under 30-year-old aide but played an important kind of gatekeeper role, spoke to members of the press on acknowledgement that it was completely off the record.
That's right.
When a reporter for the Washington Post who was at that meeting then reported it in violation of that, the Post did not deny that it was off the record and he had violated it. They merely said he kept up with our standards at the Washington Post. Well, what does that tell you?
Well, he passed off the information to another reporter, and then the reporter reported so he could put 1 degree of
Was
separation
it a professor
between
at Columbia Law School?
Yeah. Who knows? It's the interpretation that the media gives to Trump's actions, which are always negative, and it's them ascribing motives to Trump, which are always negative. So it's very difficult for me to take what they say seriously.
Do you believe that the level of treatment of this president by the major networks, do you believe it has reached a level where you are no longer concerned about it because you think it is so egregious that the average person, whether they're a Trumpster or not, the average person can see it? It is so clear. You can cut it with a knife. I want to get everybody's reaction.
Yeah, my reaction to that is we've descended into tribes, and I think it's baked into the cake now. So if you are feeling like you're going to believe Trump, you're going to believe Trump. If you're going to go with the Democrat side and the media, you're going to believe them. So it doesn't keep me up at night what the media says.
Michael, what do you say to that?
The old expression about once you ring a bell, you cannot unring it. Whether you're a Trumpster or not, once you've heard something, especially if it's a lie, it's still going to be stuck in your head. And it will affect how you think about someone. And I have no problem with the media being biased. I really don't. That's part of the First Amendment. They have the right to do so. What really bothers me is that they tell us that they are journalists when they're not journalists. They're commentators. The New York Times making this decision, essentially, for the past 2 years, they're going to do the Russia story and they're going to bury Trump. Regardless of what the news is, it's going to bury Trump. And now that that's dead, they have decided that we're going to put everything that we write is going to be that Trump is a racist. And everything that we present will be to add to that narrative. So I don't trust anything. I think it's one of the great scandals to come out that this supposed newspaper of record has such bias that I would not trust anything that comes out of it.
What does it do to the country, Charles? Just picking up on this effort by the New York Times. What does it do if it makes the case against Trump? Because when you're making the case against Trump, I believe you're also making the case against the 62 million people who
Absolutely.
voted for Trump.
Well, of course.
You're basically saying they are all racist.
You are so
And
right.
if so, what does it do to the body politic, the ability to debate and discuss issues?
I went to a party in Hyde Park a year or so ago and said something along that line. I said it was so disturbing to see all the people who voted for Trump being spoken about as if they were deplorable. And the woman I was speaking to, a very educated person, said they are deplorable. I would say that and then went on to try to make the argument. There are, the studies show that this may cover as much as 4 or 5 points in the general election. It has a big effect. The second effect is that we are, part of it is just the nature of modern media, but we are a fragmented country. Our motto, e pluribus unum, one out of many, is just been shattered, first by the universities, which organize everybody into victims groups. And if you're not in a victims group, let's say you have 2 parents and they're of the wrong race, Lord forbid, then you're an oppressor.
That's right.
And the only thing you can really do to show common cause with the oppressed, who are probably at Stanford or whatever, the daughter of a neurosurgeon of what they consider a preferred race or something, is to go along with whatever they say. It's just terribly damaging.
Is the national news media, Mike Miller, is the national news media destroying this country?
Wow. They're certainly making it harder, as Charles was saying, to be together, to be one nation. And I think the fragmentation in part is driven by their desire to drive us apart, that they're going to create these camps and they're going to say whatever they have to, that, again, I hate that word, has become the common word, narrative. They have something that they believe to be true about somebody being morally superior, and they're going to say everything they have to and can, and even if they have to lie, to match that narrative.
Even if they did it in 2016 and it didn't work.
And it just
So
it
they're
didn't work.
basically saying, hey, we tried to deliver this message once,
Right.
and 62 million people didn't hear it. We're going to keep ramming it down their throat, and hopefully more will
I would
jump
be
on
just
our
as
side.
yeah, and I would be just as upset if this were happening on the conservative side. I
Right.
do not want to be fed nonsense. I want to be
Okay.
fed truth.
We've got to pause. 1-800-723-8229. When we come back, we're going to talk about our late, great friend, Michael Bauer.
Flintstones, meet the Flintstones, they're the modern Sonic family. From the town of Beltway, meet George Jetson. His boy Elroy.
With instant acceleration, electric cars are more fun to drive and more affordable than ever. Electric cars are here. Plug in to the present.
Dallas, St. Louis, Nashville, Tuscaloosa. All major cities to feel the destruction caused by a direct hit from a tornado. Is Chicago next? It's not a question of if, but when, and the clock is ticking. Learn what to do now at ready.illinois.gov to become tornado ready.
Bruce DuMont back in Chicago, and we will get back to the discussion that we had and also talk about other political matters as the program unfolds this evening. But I do want to take this segment to talk about the passing of a longtime member of the Beyond the Beltway family, Michael Bauer. Michael Bauer was a progressive Democrat with not only great passion and intellect, but also a great sense of humor. And he would come to this program periodically. I had known Michael for many, many years, but we were never really good friends until we began to go to a lunch, which was thrown by Dave Lundy, who's a frequent guest on this program, called Lundy's Lunch. And again, he has political animals from all sides of the political spectrum that meet there on the first or the last Friday of each month. And so at that point, Michael and I got to be good friends. And I had asked Michael years ago to be a guest on Beyond the Bell because I thought he would be a good guest. But he always said, no, he didn't really want to do it. He wasn't looking for any of that stuff. So he basically turned me down for many, many years. And then about, I would say a little over 3 years ago, he finally said, yes, I'll come on and do the show. And he called me up the next day and he said, I really loved it last night. And I said, well, you were a great guest. And what followed that was not only a friendship between us, but it really turned out to be a friendship of those that appear on the program with him. And again, over the years, in fact, over the last several months when we all knew that Michael was fighting for his life, there were many people on both sides of the political spectrum that reached out and gave very special notices to Michael Bauer and to his partner Roger to hopefully try to see him through this very difficult time. So again, I say that we have a family here every Sunday night. And again, wherever you're listening on radio or television, hopefully you get to know some of these people, because if they're really good at what they do, we have them back from time to time. And Michael was one that was always available when we reached out. He had great spirit. He was a defender of the progressive causes, yet also was able to say if the Democrats did something that he didn't believe in, he had the ability. He never talked from talking points. And that's what makes a great guest. You don't talk from talking points. You talk from your heart and you talk from your head. And Michael Bauer did that. So we're going to take a few moments right now to listen to some of the comments of Michael Bauer over the last several years on this program, and then the friends that are with us this evening, and also those out in radio TV land that would like to call in and offer an assessment, give you an opportunity to do it as well. We'll also be hearing from a very good local friend of Michael's when we come back from this brief look at some of the memorable moments of Michael Bauer on Beyond the Beltway.
I have been involved in a number of charitable and political activities for many decades. I currently serve as the co-chair of the State of Illinois Holocaust and Genocide Commission. I am the campaign chair for one of the mayoral candidates in Chicago. Bruce has given me a second of personal privilege to say yesterday was a very special day for my family. We had a family bat mitzvah of my great niece. What makes that so special is that my mom, a Holocaust survivor, a sole survivor of her immediate family of 38, attended the second bat mitzvah of her second oldest great-granddaughter, my mom, who, God willing, will be 103 in 2 months. Phenomenal.
Wow, incredible. And she's still alive and well?
She is alive and well, and her mind is sharp, and we FaceTime twice a day, and she goes on and on and on and on. I've always said this to candidates. There is a very different skill set of being an effective elected official than in being an effective candidate. Joe Biden, from my perspective, would be a very effective elected official, would be a very effective president based on his experience and his qualifications.
But
However,
not based on his last 2 runs for President of the United States.
Well, I was just going to say, but as a candidate, he is terrible, and he's displaying it again in his reaction to these charges against him.
When you said from the very beginning you were going to be for Lori Lightfoot,
Yes.
did you believe from the very beginning that she could make it or not? Tell us the truth.
Well, actually, in the very beginning, I assumed she would be running against Rahm Emanuel and other people, and I had a very high expectation that she would beat Rahm Emanuel. She was the anti-Rahm candidate, and people in this town were tired of Rahm.
Okay, but then you went into a period when it was hard to raise money because you were her chief fundraiser, right?
Well,
you
I was
went
also
to a big
finance
dip.
chair.
Finance chair.
And then we went into a period where Rahm announced he wasn't going to run, and all of a sudden a bunch of big dogs got in the race, and we went into a period that was a very difficult period.
Okay.
And then we went into another period where Ed Burke suddenly got indicted.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, we came back alive.
And can one assume that that the fundraising is starting to flow? It started to flow since a week ago Tuesday. You're getting more checks
Well,
to
the
retire
fund-
debt.
She doesn't have debt.
Debt.
No,
Okay.
the money really started flooding in about the first or second week in February, and it came pouring in. And after the primary, it really came in unbelievable. So,
Okay. Now I want to ask again another inside question.
okay.
Do you, as the finance person who was
Yes.
watching over, are you keeping track, and is the candidate interested in knowing who was there first and who was there late? Because I've always been told that early money means gold to a candidate. The people that were there at the very beginning, those donations mean a lot more emotionally than maybe even fiscally.
I would put it a little differently. I would say that the mayor-elect is aware of who was with her last May when she first announced and who came on board after the primary.
Michael Bauer, you were about to make a point
Right.
about
I think asking Kim Jong-un to denuclearize, we're forgetting about a precedent that I'm sure is very cognizant in his mind, and that's Libya and Muammar Gaddafi. Well, we negotiated an agreement with Muammar Gaddafi where he agreed to give up his nuclear weapons, and then a couple of administrations later, we decided, I don't like this guy anymore, and we helped bomb him out of existence. So, and he didn't have his nuclear weapons at that point to defend himself. So I think going for nuclearization is really never going to happen.
I agree
You
with
know,
that.
I think containment is the key. We have gone for decades with China engaged in stealing our intellectual property, with pouring into the marketplace, global marketplace, counterfeit goods, and Democratic presidents and Republican presidents have never done anything about the so-called China trade problem. And I have to tell you something. I don't know whether the tariff situation will work or not, but I give Donald Trump credit that he's at least willing to tackle the problem and try to resolve it. I think certainly one of the things that came out of this killing in Virginia Beach is the notion that this killer was using a silencer on one of his weapons. Now, silencers are legal in all 50 states for reasons that befuddle me totally. Why does someone need to have a silencer on a weapon? For what reason whatsoever? But going beyond that, I actually think at some point, we as a country will realize the Heller decision was absolutely wrongly decided. It will go into the garbage pail with Korematsu, with Dred Scott, with Plessy versus Ferguson,
Roe v. Wade.
with Bowers versus Hardwick. And at some point, we will outlaw private possession of weapons. We are a society in the United States right now that is literally committing suicide on a weekly basis through all these mass killings. And we have to decide at some point, are we willing to live with this as a price of being an American? Or are we going to take significant action, not for reasonable gun control, but for strict gun control and outlaw private possession? On a very personal note, I'm fighting for the second time in 2 months a form of cancer called advanced cutaneous squamous cell carcinoma, which normally is a skin cancer, but for me, for the second time in 2 months, it has penetrated my skin. This time it's gone into my bones, some of my ribs on my left side, on my right side, on my chest, and my right pelvis, and on my legs. And I am on an immunotherapy drug, the first patient at Northwestern Memorial to be on this immunotherapy drug. It's brand new to the marketplace. And I am very optimistic that I will continue to be a guest on this show for years to come.
We certainly hope that, and you beat it before, so you can beat it again.
I plan to.
And I think
Thank you,
again,
Bruce.
your Facebook friends certainly know that story. You've
Yes.
told it to a number of close friends.
Yes.
But again, I think it's important since you're part of the Beyond the Beltway family. There's a lot of people out there who either had similar situations, or you can be an inspiration to them. So thank you for being with us
Thank you.
tonight. Michael Bauer, a very good friend and just a really good friend. I know when I heard the news, it's like the second time I've heard news of someone passing, with a text. It's very impersonal, but again, I know it made me cry when I heard the news, because he was more than just a great member of this family, he was a good personal friend. And I know that Jennifer Nevins, you, at least around the table this evening, I think you probably appeared on the program with Michael more than anyone else. And you probably never, ever agreed politically, but you folks kind of loved each other, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. Michael, one of the last things Michael and I communicated to each other was that, we loved each other. And most of those clips that you showed, I was there for most of them, not all of them. And I remember him talking. And what I will remember most about Michael is that I was not a Trump supporter to Michael. I was a person first, second, third, and somewhere down the list, I was a political adversary. And I will always miss him. It was such a wonderful thing being able to be with him. And he was truly a man among men.
When we come back, we'll hear from the rest of our guests and also some special guests who'll be calling in. We'll take this discussion through the end of this hour. We'll be coming back to our regular discussion of politics in hour number 2. I'm Bruce DuMont. From coast to coast and border to border, tonight, mourning the loss of a good friend, Michael Bauer.
That was
If you look hard enough, go off the beaten track far enough, you'll find an America teeming with the unusual, the odd, the downright strange.
I'm Will Klinger, and I'm your guide on a package tour we like to call
Wild Travels.
Join us on our weekly road trip to see America's most offbeat and unusual attractions. Wild Travels, available on your local PBS station, or it darn well should be.
When CSX moves forward, so do the rest of us.
They're listening in El Paso, Texas tonight, and we'll hopefully hear from them before the program ends. And Mike Miller, you wanted to make a couple of comments,
Yeah.
and then we have people calling in as well.
Of all the people on the other side that I've been on 71 times. This is my 71, and I must say, of all the people I've ever dealt with, he was the one I enjoyed having on the other side of the table. And it was actually a personal reason. So many times within academia, I'm dealing with people who really believe that as a conservative and as a Republican, I am morally inferior, and they are morally superior, and they are smug about it. And that really bothers me. And he was never once smug. Now, I completely disagree with his comment, for example, on gun control. But he would never, and any time we would have a disagreement, have some smugness that I know the answer and you are so deplorable. And that's why I admired him so. I met him through this lunch you talk about, and I don't want to say fell in love with the man, but I did, in a sense. He just is such a genuine human being.
Charles, you're also a frequent visitor to that lunch, and you've also engaged with him around the table here.
And been to parties with him, and very much know and like his husband, Roger, now his widower. And I guess the one word I would use about him, beyond what you said so well, Mike, is 100%. He was 100% for a lot of the liberal and progressive causes. Oh, yeah. He was 100% for a strong U.S.-Israel relationship. He was 100% for LGBTQ, all the
LGBTQ.
letters. Yeah. He was 100% for all those things, and he could do it without being 100% against other people. And that is a rare talent.
Yeah. Joining us now is someone that knew Michael probably longer than anyone at this table, and that's Tracy Baim. Tracy Baim is a member of the Gay and Lesbian Hall of Fame in the city of Chicago. She's the editor and publisher, or the publisher, of the Chicago Reader, and once upon a time, she was also the chief cook and bottle washer, and she's still a bigwig over at Windy City Times, which is the largest gay newspaper in the city of Chicago. Tracy, your comment on the role that Michael Bauer played within the gay and lesbian community.
Certainly so large. I don't know that you could really talk about it in a short period of time, but I met him circa around 1990. And his work on Jewish LGBT issues in general, was phenomenal, but it was also very personal. The fact that he and Roger would be seen at galas and events all over Chicago was really symbolic, because so much of what the change we achieved was because people couldn't look you in the eye and be as discriminatory as if you were an anonymous person. And having Roger and him at events with Dick Durbin, at events with Jan Schakowsky and all these other politicians really had an impact on them too. He also was great across the board on many issues, including military equality. My partner is an Air Force veteran, and he was very supportive of the fight to end Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Pro-choice was really an amazing thing to see Michael work on, because not many gay men, except Terry Cosgrove, are as passionate about the issue of reproductive freedom as Michael Bauer was. And so he was a huge ally to the women's portion of the LGBTQ community in a way that was both refreshing and also sometimes rare. So he just, across the board, helped not only political candidates, but also the core issues that our community was successful at fighting over the last 3 decades or more in Chicago.
Right.
So both on a personal level and a political level.
Yeah. Well, he will be laid to rest on Tuesday in Chicago with services, and again, our condolences to his longtime partner Roger. We wish him, as best one could have in these circumstances. But Tracy, again, thank you very much for adding to our discussion and reflections on Michael Bauer this evening. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Joining us now is Dave Lundy. We mentioned him earlier in the broadcast. He is a frequent guest on this program as well, and really it was at his luncheon, which he has once a month, where at least I first met Michael with any regularity, and from that meeting, his regular participation on Beyond the Beltway emerged from that. So, Dave, I know you knew Michael a long time. Your reaction to his passing?
Well, personally, I've been devastated by this. Michael and I, over the years, grew very, very close. We would talk several times a week. And it was a really nice tribute you just did. Always great to see Michael. You know, the thing that I think everybody is touching on when they talk about him as, when conservatives talk about him as their favorite liberal, is that Mike always talked from the heart. So you may disagree with him, but you knew it was coming from his heart. Bruce, you put it exactly right earlier when you said Michael never talked from talking points. He was a genuine, original, and in the Yiddish tradition, Mike was a mensch. And I think everybody who knew him, even if they didn't always agree with him, they respected him, they liked him. He had this magnetic, warm smile. And it just spoke volumes about who he was as a person.
And the laugh. He had that great laugh. He had a twinkle in his eye and a great laugh.
Yeah, no, the laugh is something I'll miss dearly. You know, Mike had a tradition, and this is not a Beyond the Beltway thing, but Mike had a tradition at weddings and bar mitzvahs, and Mike and Roger loved to bump and grind with the bride. He did it with my wife on multiple occasions, and as a gay man, you're like, this is wonderful.
We gotta take a look at that video.
One of the great things that happened on Facebook after I told the world that Mike had passed, and then everybody started doing tributes, is that people started posting their photos of Michael bumping and grinding with the wife, with the spouse.
Dave, we have to say farewell at this point. Again, it's always good when you're discussing someone that's passed away. the last story brings laughter to the conversation. You did that again. We all have a sorry heart this evening. But again, we thank you very much for joining us to share your thoughts on Michael Bauer. I'm Bruce DuMont. When we return, back to politics.
Hi, I'm Ryan.
Welcome to the world, 2116. You can fly across town in minutes or across the globe in under an hour. Whole communities are living on Mars. And solar satellites provide Earth with unlimited clean power. In less than a century, Boeing took the world from seaplanes to space planes, across the universe and beyond. And if you thought that was amazing, you just wait.
Today, fresh fruits and vegetables will go from a field in California to a grocer in Miami. A bottle of beer from Eagle Pass will journey to a restaurant in Manhattan. A 2x4 in Oregon will find its way to a townhome in Denver. A hybrid will say goodbye to Detroit and hello to a showroom in Austin. While a steel beam will leave a mill in Illinois for a high-rise in Phoenix. And a flat screen in China will head to an electronics store in Memphis. Because today, as every day, wherever you find business, you'll find us.